Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so as you guys know, you diehard chess fans out there, we are in the middle of the Speed Chess Championships. And so as you guys know, Hikaru Nakamura did defeat Wesley So by a slim margin yesterday, or 2 days ago. Yesterday? 2 days ago? I don't remember. But yeah, so 13.5 to 12.5. So it was close, but they got into the bullet portion. And Hikaru Nakamura is the best in the world at bullet. So it was gonna be a close one. So right now we have Magnus Carlsen playing Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and they're actually doing it as we speak. And I was able to grab the first game that they played against each other. It was a decisive win. And it's a pretty nice one. So as I always say, at the end of the videos, I have the answer to the previous puzzle, and I have a new puzzle for you for all those super diehard chess fans that love tactical puzzles and combinations and things like that. I got you. But if you are ready, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. Okay, let me make sure the camera is focused. Yep, sharp. We good? There we go. Bam. All right, cool. So we have D4. So knight to F6. We got C4. We got G6. Knight to C3. D5. So we have the Grünfeld on the board. And so it's a very heavily played opening. It is slightly worse for black. Actually considerably worse for black. It's not the soundest opening to play as black. It's very competitive though. And so it forces white to play, very sharp. So if they're not playing very accurately, then black can take over the advantage pretty quickly. And so we have knight to F3. So bishop to G7. We have C takes D5. We have knight takes D5. And then we have queen to A4. And queen to A4 is a very rare line. The number one... the top moves in the position are thousands and thousands, even up to 18,000 played. And I believe that queen to A4 is only in a couple hundred. So it's a very rare line to play. And so, that's where Magnus Carlsen shines. He plays those rare lines, trying to, his strength is tactics and in games. And so, he's always trying to get he's always trying to get his opponent out of their preparation as quickly as possible, especially in these quicker games. So like I said, we do have queen to A4. And so we see knight to C6, clearly the strongest reply to that. Of course, you have bishop to D7 or knight to C6. And so we see E4. And so we see knight to B6 trying to kick the queen. And so we see queen to C2. And then we see castles by black. Now, some of you guys might be looking at the position right now and wondering like, well, isn't that D4 pawn kind of juicy? And it actually is. So if you look at two of the lines that you can really go down, which is bishop takes D4 and knight takes D4. So after queen to C2, if we see knight takes D4, we would see knight takes D4, bishop takes D4, and we would see bishop to H6. So you have won a pawn, but now you aren't able to castle, at least the normal way. Because as you guys know, the king cannot pass through this danger square on the way to castling, with the rook coming over. So, like I said, it is a pawn, and it's probably not the worst ever to not be able to castle. It really just depends on the situation. But at the end of the day, like I said, you have won a pawn. So, I mean, you just kind of have to decide, is grabbing a pawn worth more than a castle in your mind. So if we go to the other one, after queen to C2, we see bishop takes D4. And so we would see bishop to B5. Bishop would come back to G7. And so we would see castles by white, bishop to D7, rook to D1, and queen to C8. This is probably the better of the two lines. But like I said, you definitely have the ability to castle here, and you do have an extra pawn. So like I said, at the end of the day, I mean, if you are deeming that a pawn is worth more than castling, then by all means. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave did not, so he went ahead and castled. So we see castles. We see D5. Basically solving that problem that we talked about a second ago. And so we see knight to B4, queen to B3, and we see A5. And A5 is the brand new move of the game. A5 has never been seen before. You guys know we were going to get into a novelty fairly quickly because of all the queen moves. And then the fact that queen to A4 was a very rare line. It is move 10 that we have a5 is the novelty of the game. Pretty clear. You're just trying to defend that knight. They're on b4, even though it doesn't have the ability to stay there for long, because we see a3, and then we see knight to a6, and so we see bishop to g5. A lot, like I said before, whenever a side has a nice pawn center, you're going to be trying to, you're going to be trying to knock it away with a pawn push. And so bishop to g5 is just trying to prevent an e6 pawn push, because of course, you can't push e6 because, the queen is just going to be falling. So, bishop g5 is trying to just prevent that. So we have knight to c5 kicking the queen. And so we see queen back to c2, and then we see a4. And now an interesting line of play, a4, unfortunately kind of wastes a tempo. If we were to see bishop to take c3, you would see b takes c3. You'd have to take back with the b pawn, because if not, knight takes e4 comes, and then you have an issue with your queen placement with the bishop. You would see f5, and this is just perfectly timed because you're breaking open the position, and the king is in the center of the board. So anytime you're playing against an opponent that just refused to castle, and you're already castled, you're in safety and everything pretty much developed, you want to try to break the position open in the center as much as possible so that you can exploit the fact that their king is still dead center. So this was definitely something that was very strong. But like I said, we do have a4, just trying to, give the knight a nice little outpost here on b3, which you'll see it comes relevant in a second. So we see rook to d1, bishop to g4, so bishop to e2. We see knight to b3, like I said, giving that knight an outpost there on the nice b3 square. And so we see bishop back to e3, trying to make sure that we defend this d4 square, because that was definitely a redirecting square for the knight. And so we see bishop takes f3, and we see pawn takes f3. And so we see queen to d7. Now with this pawn takes f3, you don't want to take with the bishop, because it's going to leave this c4 square open for the knight to come. So it was definitely better to take with the g pawn in this position. So we see h4, and we see e5. So we see knight to b5. So rook a to c8, and so we see h5. And now this is kind of crazy that white has a very severe advantage in this position, simply because the king is still stuck in the center of the board. So you would think, looking at it, that black is doing very well. They have their pieces, they have all their pieces developed, they're castled, everything seems to be going well for black. But as looks can be deceiving, because that is not the case in this position. So we have f5, trying to break open the position, like I said. We have h takes g6, h takes g6, and we have e takes pawn takes f5 here. And so we see pawn takes f5, and we see d6. And so pawn takes d6, we have queen to d3, and then we have knight to c4. And if you want to go ahead and pause the video in this position and see what Magnus Carlsen played, it's a very nice tactical shot that Magnus Carlsen had at his disposal. And it's definitely not the easiest move to see. It's not very natural. So like I said, go ahead and pause the video and see if you can take a look and see if you can see what Magnus Carlsen played in this position here. All right, cool. So for those of you that are very sacrificial and just kind of reach for the craziest move in the position, it was queen takes c4 with check. And it's just a complete queen sacrifice. And after the rook takes, the bishop takes with check, you see rook to f7, and you see knight takes d6. And it is actually in this position that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave actually resigned the game. So if we just run through a couple of lines, you're going to resign because you're just losing way too much material. Now you do have the queen, but you're just losing way too much material as black. And so the best possible move is knight to d4. And so you would see knight takes f7, getting rid of that rook. And after king to f8, because you do have a discovery on that diagonal, so you want to step out of that. You would see bishop takes d4, pawn takes d4, and you would see knight to g5. And there really isn't much to do in this position. Like I said, I mean, because, you know, you're just going to be continuing to lose too much material. And so even after something like queen to c6, you'd see knight to e6 with check. The king would come down. You'd see knight takes g7, queen takes c4, and then knight takes f5 with check. And then after the king moves, you would just be winning a further pawn with knight takes d4. And as you can see, even though you have a queen is not, it cannot possibly hold a position against two rooks and a complete minor piece. So that is that. And getting to these puzzles real quick for you. This was the position I gave you guys before. And so, like I said, it was removing pawn cover, the demolition of pawn cover. So we have rook takes g7, and we see rook takes g7, knight takes f6, queen to e7, knight takes e8, queen takes e8, and we see queen to f4, because that knight is pinned. And so the rook comes over to defend. So we see f6, knight to g6, rook takes e7, knight takes e7, and then we see queen to f7. And this king is actually in a checkmating box, and so he doesn't really have any way to escape that. And so the next puzzle for you guys is this puzzle here, and it is a decoy. Actually, no, this one is still a demolition of pawn cover. So this is an advanced demolition of pawn cover. Like I said, if you want to set this up when you're bored at home and take a look at it, I will give you the answer in the next probably 30-45 minutes when I make this next video. But I appreciate you guys stopping by, subscribe and like, and give me some comments, and I will see you guys next time. All right, appreciate it.